Hello there, and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Equity Story. My name is David Malinowski, and I'll be your host today. Today we have Borys Musielak on our segment. He is an engineer turned investor, founding partner of SMOK Ventures, and co-founder of Reactor X and Startup Poland. Welcome.
Hi, welcome. Hello, everyone.
Lovely to have you here. So I suppose we will start from the beginning, really, because as I mentioned, you are an engineer. You also kind of call yourself
a software engineer.
A software
engineer.
Okay.
So not a physics, not like hardcore stuff, just writing software.
So that was a journey. That was definitely a journey, an interesting one, I'm sure, of you going from and evolving from being a software engineer to a business owner, a mentor to other people, a person who actually helps other people as a strategic advisor grow the businesses from an early stage. So I suppose if you could tell our viewers about your journey, how did it all start? I also know that you worked in the UK for a brief period of time. We'll get to that.
Yeah, it's not like it was planned. My dream was to become a project manager at a software, design company when I was a student. So I was hired super early, like second year of my studies or third year of my studies.
It's pretty early.
I was pretty lucky to be hired by a guy who's now a hero of this Polish startup ecosystem, Stefan Lotory from Booksy, from iTaxi. Back then, he was running a software company called EO Networks, and he was doing shitty. was doing really badly. So they had to fire. They had to fire everyone, and they hired like 5 students, and I was one of the students. It was the 4 co-founders, and there was 2 more students that they hired. I was one of those guys. And I had to do everything. So like straight from like starting, I had to go
baptism of fire, they call it.
Yeah. So I was like, can you do coding? Can you do design? Can you do project management? Yeah, I had to do all of that. So it was a very quick course of just building stuff and also like being mentored by. Back then, I didn't
Captains
know.
of the industry, effectively.
But now it seems like, one of the top guys in the Polish startup ecosystem. So that was a quick start and like deep water from day one.
Okay, so essentially, but then again, I mean, as you said, second year at uni, that is pretty early for the standards of Poland, I reckon at least. And that coupled with such baptism of fire, as he just explained, must have been pretty intense. So, well done for you for having coped with the whole thing and not kind of calling it quits on the whole industry, on the whole project.
It was like I was lucky to even have a job back then because it was just end of the crisis, 2002. So it wasn't really easy like right now to be hired as a software engineer, even if you're junior, especially if you're junior. But I was lucky to be part of an ecosystem that was starting, and I was lucky to be able to watch people who are one of the first movers. So I think that was really inspiring. So at that point, I think very quickly, like I loved the chaos. I loved
the creative chaos.
The part where we didn't really know what you're doing. We were a super small young team trying to do projects for big banks and for like the big insurance companies. We were like, why are they working with us? But then we somehow went through. And that was the way Stefan was always doing business, and I think that was part of I'm doing business very differently, but still that was a part of inspiration for me to even like think, hey, I'm good enough to try that at some point as well. So that was when the light, in my head somewhere told me, hey, maybe you can be an entrepreneur at some point, but it took me about 8 years to get from that to actually start my first business.
So essentially, baptism of fire, learning a lot fairly quickly, if one can put it that way, working with people who will essentially turn out to be captains of the industry, as we know today, and that sort of entrepreneurial spirit being fostered and growing in you day by day as you worked with these guys, but also this being as a process that you kind of reflected on, what you did, what you learned, and you thought that, shit, I can do it one day myself as well, have my own business. So how did you go about, making this switch? You decided that you want to start your own thing. What was the impulse when you thought, do you think there is such a thing like the right time to go your own way?
It was more, now it feels like maybe it makes sense, the journey, but like at that point I was just trying to do stuff I liked. So I was like a lot into open source software. Just generally, I was really interested in how this Linux movement was moving. So I was like, the first thing that came to my mind was like, I want to be building that in Poland. So I came up with like a small like portal website with like news of what's happening in the world in that area. Like super niche. With Linux, open source, free software, that kind of stuff. So that was my first thing. Like it wasn't really a business. It was just the first project that I came up with. But we got to like weirdly big numbers for 2005 or 6. We got like to about like 1 million people at the website at some point.
Pretty impressive.
And it started actually making some money. I was like from ads. It was wild times because no one knew how to do things. Like even like building website there wasn't a WordPress. The WordPress was just starting, so there wasn't tools really to start it. So you have to code everything. So it was just a bit harder to get in. But also like there was no templates, which was cool for engineers because we got to kind of make up our own
devise
stuff.
Everything essentially.
So that was like the first thing, and then I kind of started building a number of websites, and it turned out we had like 7 different websites, like each focusing on one part of the IT in general. We even got acquisition offers. I should have taken that, by the way.
Do you mind me asking from whom?
It was from a guy who then owned Anathemat. So he wanted to like join it into the. It was like 100K PLN. not a huge acquisition offer.
But I mean, at that point,
at that point, I was like, I would have an exit. I said, no, I'm too good. I'm gonna be building a big thing.
The empire
didn't really happen. Like I was too busy with doing day-to-day work, so this was always a side project to me. But that was like the first thing. We built a community, so that was the biggest benefit for me. But doing that is that we built a community, and actually met a number of people who I hired later at my first startup. I knew them from that community and of engineers, of geeks, of people who are like really into the new stuff that was happening in the tech ecosystem. So, and then the second business was basically also my passion, the other passion, which is film. So I wanted to build a tool for myself, which is like, I don't recommend people to actually be doing that, but that's how engineers work. Like they see a problem, they don't see a solution, they want to solve it, so they solve it for themselves, and they kind of hope that maybe others have the same issue. In my case, it turned out pretty much all right, so we created a movie recommender engine that we could like write a few films, and then it would recommend us stuff that we haven't seen, but we could be really enjoying.
On the basis of what we've seen before.
Plus other people's opinions. So it was a machine learning algorithm back in 2008, I think.
I reckon Netflix has a thing like that.
They didn't yet. So it was pretty early, like IMDb or even like FilmWeb in Poland. No one had much of that. So it was like, right now, it feels a natural thing. Every website has a recommender engine. A lot of websites are recommender engines.
Usually like, I also like this. And, it kind of like makes sense when you look at these recommendations.
So back then it wasn't. So it was pretty early. So that was my second kind of business that I started, and I think this one was the one that got me to an actual exit and an actual business versus just a hobby project.
Very good. And so that was your first kind of pet project. Kind of got you out from this sort of box of like working for someone else. Even though the work for someone else that you mentioned was very rewarding, quite good.
Yeah, of course.
You learned a lot. So how did you get to SMOK from that and the reactor? Do you want to talk about that as well? Because these two platforms are quite interesting.
It's also non-obvious. So when we started Filmmaster, I started hiring a few people. We started with a grant, like one of the grants from European Union. It was like a 200K 100K grant, I think. Which was like a lot to me.
Like a subsidy grant from the EU?
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's how I quit my job in the UK at that point, moved back to Poland, and we started this business.
Did you like it, by the way? Sorry, obviously, it's just out of sheer curiosity. Did you like working in the city, or was
I hated it.
It was a shit. Well, to be fair enough. I mean, that was also reasons why I ultimately decided to, make the jump back and move back to Warsaw.
It was good money, really good money, and I learned how the big corporates operate,
how they function, the big, big firms.
In mysterious ways, they do. So I was like, it's good knowledge now that I know, because a lot of my startups sell to those. So I kind of know how they operate.
Them. What's the sort of like more or less like behind the veil of a fancy website and the nice shiny offices, how the processes work and what the decision making tree
really convoluted, really complicated. No one knows what they're doing, just like in startups but bigger.
Yeah.
So
I can't possibly comment, mate.
I didn't love it, as I said, because it was just not.
It's something to experience. You know what I mean? Like, even
and quickly quit, so that you don't get too someone into that ecosystem. I've seen really smart people just kind of get too deep there, and they just can't.
You can't leave.
It's a nice trap, all the hedge funds, all the investment banking. So back to my story. So when I was back, basically we started hiring some people. I was still working from home. And I was like, hey, let's maybe find an office. That's the thing you do, right? When you start a startup. So we started looking for offices. Everything was boring. And we find this one really nice place, like a small villa in Żoliborz, where we are right now.
That's pretty cool. That sounds like a massive project now.
But then I was like, hey, we cannot afford it. So what do we do? So we really wanted that place. So we got a few other people to say, hey, maybe let's split that. I put it on Facebook. A lot of people say, hey, that's a good idea. There was nothing like, there was zero co-working spaces in Warsaw.
Do you mind me asking, what year was this?
2010 or 11.
Okay.
So there was like zero co-working spaces in Warsaw. Everyone worked like in homes or like just regular
apartments or like regular offices.
So it was really good timing, and then a number of people like joined, and a lot of those people that joined at that point are now like some of the top entrepreneurs in Poland. Weirdly,
so again, good, right place, right time.
True. Okay. So we rented out that place. Not a good decision, as in like economically, we had to we spent too much on. But on the other hand, community building wise, amazing. It was a good investment, yeah. So we called this place Reactor because we thought there was a lot of reactions or whatever. So and we started throwing parties. We started throwing parties. And
to be fair, when you say villa or a mansion, that was the first thing that I thought to myself,
of course.
What a nice project. I would love to partake.
And it became like the center place for startup ecosystem in Warsaw for a few years. And we got a reputation for like being community builders. We started like helping out with like office hours to other entrepreneurs, even though we were still building. Like there was myself, Ania Walkowska, who used to run Homplex. Now she runs Propagate, which we invested into. And it was Kuba Filipowski, who runs NetGuru. And there was a lot of other people involved, like Daniel Sumacz, who now runs RTB House, and a number of really like builders of the Polish startup ecosystem were somehow related to Reactor. And then at some point, we thought, we've built something big. We have a lot of trust from the community. We should start an actual acceleration program versus just like ad hoc mentoring. So that's where I hired Diana, who was back then basically a student. She just finished her physics degree, and she was like, didn't know what to do in her life. And she got to Reactor. She kind of took care of the house, as in office management, but she also wanted to do something bigger. So we thought, hey, let's do this more kind of professional, not really, but like a bit more professional program where we have like batches, we had entrepreneurs, mentors, and we would take some equity in those startups and try to help them grow. Yeah. The first batch was interesting, great people, but like nothing came out of it. Really no startups.
When you mean batch, is like a structured, timed program. So like 12 months, you take people, 3 months. Yeah, you take people on board, and you have a structure in place
Sure.
and teach them stuff and workshops and you mentor
like
them. Okay.
And then there was like a demo day at the end, so they kind of show off what they've built. And they've built in crazy stuff, like some in AR, in crypto, back in 2014, 15. So it was super, super early in a lot of those
quite ahead of the game.
None of that really worked out in the first batch. The second batch was better, but we kind of gradually started building things, and we got to 10 batches, and then eventually we became one of the top leading acceleration programs in this region, not just in Poland, because we started taking one of the best decisions was to do everything in English from day one. So we would be taking a lot of Ukrainian startups, Belarusian startups, even a few startups from Kosovo flew to Warsaw to be part of this program. We had mentors that were also from all over the globe. So that was it was like a kind of international enclave in Warsaw. A lot of the
community
people,
was able to kind of gather
a lot of
around
expats in the startup ecosystem would join. So that was the cool part. So then when we kind of thought, hey, we can actually help. We feel like a lot of people would come in super early. They didn't really have any knowledge. They were first-time founders. Maybe they had some experience in the industry, but they didn't really do entrepreneurship, just like I was a few years before. And then they built apps or services, and they would get funding. And when they started getting funding, I was like, I should be funding them. We should be funding them. Why is someone else making money
exactly taking our slice of cake, effectively.
And this is a time where we also met Paul Bregiel, and right now our third partner at SMOK, who already had experience in that in the US. He built the first acceleration program in San Francisco back in 2007 or 8. So he 10 years before he's done that road in a more mature ecosystem.
So it was just about kind of repeating that success here.
And he was he's got the Polish roots. He always wanted to do something in Poland. So we also hang out a lot at different events.
So good chemistry as well on top of that.
Of course, otherwise it makes no sense. We need to have fun as well. And then he just said, hey, let's take it the next step. And it was good timing because that was a time when I also was at the end of my vesting, 4 years before I sold my startup, Filmmaster, to a US company. And I was at the end of my vesting period at Samba TV, the company that acquired us. So I was already starting to look ahead, what's next. So Paul came in the right time, and he was like, hey, let's build a super small boutique venture capital fund in Warsaw. And I was like, sure, let's try that. I had no clue how to even start building, but that's how the whole story it kind of made sense because we had a lot of network here, and he had super network in the US and also in Asia. So it made sense that we could find a really good deal flow in the country, but also eventually in the Central Eastern European ecosystem. And he and his brother could be really helping those companies when they grow to build
to
in
globalize
the US,
and commercialize,
go to the US, get investors over there in the US, in Asia. On paper, it made sense, but we had to build it. So that was a big challenge.
Make it happen,
and that was back in 2018 when we kind of decided to take a chance on that.
And I suppose fast forward from that point until now, with all that experience and all these, batches, as you put it, of people that you worked with. So what do you see, at the moment on the market here in the C ecosystem when it comes to firstly, I suppose, in terms of Poland, and then in the broader market, what are the trends, what's new and interesting in your view, obviously, because if anything, you have a very kind of good overall view on what's going on in different parts of the region.
Sure. So I was, back in 2011, I started fundraising for the first time for my startup here in Poland, and the journey sucked. There wasn't really a lot of people with money. Those who had money were assholes, most of them. It's still the case, but less. So there was how the ecosystem evolved was just huge. It's such a difference. It feels like a different era. Back in 2010, maybe 5 venture capital funds, really bad terms. No one knew how to do stuff.
Unfavorable
Very
terms.
unfavorable to startups. People taking like 60% of your equity day one and getting the 100K to
How do you keep yourself motivated to actually do work?
Someone
does that to you.
I ignored all of those guys,
Yeah,
and I went like straight to UK, Germany. I got like angels from all over Europe. But a lot of people got stuck, with those. We were like one of the first Polish startups to get external funding from outside of, like global startup to get funding from outside of Poland. So now I see an actual ecosystem. We have 50 different VC funds. They compete, so they have to get for like the best entrepreneurs really dictate the terms. It's not.
It's the buyer's market now, effectively.
It's just. I wouldn't say it's mature, but it's like way more mature than it used to be. So one of the reasons we actually started the fund was to help like create better standards in this ecosystem. And Poland is actually really like on top of Central Eastern Europe. When you travel to Romania, to Hungary, to countries like Croatia, where Diana, my partner, has been like doing a lot of traveling recently to just kind of cover those
get the sense of what's going on,
understand where we should be focused a bit more now that we have a fund that can invest in all of those regions. Those markets are even less mature than Poland. Like they are still stuck. A lot of them are still stuck in the 2010 kind of era with like a few funds only, and entrepreneurs don't have that much chance to get funding. So when we get to those markets, we are like greeted in a saying, "Hey, American VC fund investing in CE with actual context and actual track record now." Because after 3 years, we've already proven that.
Yeah, of course.
We deliver on that promise. Like 80% of the money that our startups raised come from outside of the region, which is something that's unprecedented for this for CE. Usually it was just like CE investors investing in those startups, and they never kind of grow global. A lot of them just become local leaders, and we don't really care about that. Our partners are in the US. They just care about
obviously as you kind of I can tell that as your example that you follow, you look up to what's been going on in the US, the sort of optimistic can-do attitudes, and people trying to go into business to actually make it big, as opposed to just kind of getting by. So having that extra degree of ambition, is that fair?
Yeah. Also, is that it's really hard now to build is anything that will grow locally and be still a viable venture capital type business. Back in 2010, when startups like Interia or Onet or Virtualna Polska in Poland came up, and in other countries there was also similar like local leaders, Allegro and other e-commerce leaders in each of those countries. You were able to build something big locally and still make sense for VC. Now I think those markets are kind of taken and they kind of became more global. It's just really hard. It's easier to build something in a niche, but in a niche that's a global niche. So I think the attitudes of entrepreneurs also change, and it's just now it's like there's so many examples of really amazing companies from all over Central Eastern Europe. Like Estonia, a great example with TransferWise, with Bolt, with like companies we would never expect to come from a small country in the Baltics, but they became global leaders in their niches. And Poland's not worse. We have Booksy, Dog Planner, we have Brainly, a number of like IceEye, leading the space race, and then we have Romania with UiPath. A number of really amazing companies from the region came up, and people look up to those people and they think, hey, we can maybe do it. Like we knew those engineers from our local tech university, and we are just like that, but with more experience. And now we have mentors from those guys. We can attend programs like ReactorX and a number of other programs in the ecosystem to get to know those people. It just fast track to funding to more success. So it's exciting. I think it's exciting times in CE, and that's why we kind of expanded from Poland to be able to fund anywhere in the Central Eastern Europe, because we feel this is one of the fastest growing emerging markets globally.
And on the point that you said that in some of these countries which perhaps that, again, which are in Eastern Europe, but these neighboring countries do not have as developed, if you like Poland has, and the market is not as mature as you put it. Why is that? It's just like a quick question here, because is it more the issue of kind of the matter of mentality, or is it the local legal / tax / kind of commercial ecosystem, or what is it that certain countries like Poland manage to get slightly a wee bit ahead in the game, if you like, whereas some other country which might perhaps be bordering on Poland, or also in this region, has not made that progress, and it's still, as you said, kind of stuck in 2010s?
Hard question. Like, there's probably a number of reasons. Poland always looked up to the US, which is not typical for Europe in general. Europe is kind of skeptical of the US, but Poland, for some reason, we loved, the kind of capitalistic approach of the US.
People do ask me about that in the UK, and everyone is very surprised.
What's wrong with you guys? Why do you look at Germany just here, or do you just
the industrial miracle?
So I think that's part of it. The other part, have to give credit when it's due. It's the government. Like, they made really good decisions in supporting the venture capital ecosystem, with starting with the first approaches with KFK, a fund of funds, and then it came into PFR Ventures. They created a number of funds. They chose people who are ecosystem players, not clerics, who used to be choosing those funds, and they chose they were the biggest emerging manager supporting fund of funds, I think, in Europe over the last few years.
PFR?
So a lot of new funds were created, not just the old guys, but guys like me, they were my first big investor, and they kicked off a number of funds. Like Nextro is another one, a number of really good funds that were just started a few years ago. So I think that, and everyone was like, hey, why do you create so many venture capital funds? There is not enough startups. But we are in capitalism. When there's money, people start startups. It's just
they will think of ways.
People, hey, it's easier now. So a lot of people from the corporate world who made some money already, they are a bit more secure. They started, creating companies. In the last few years, that's a huge, a huge number of startups created in Poland, which is not the case in Hungary, which is not the case in Slovakia.
I see. Okay.
So I think that's part of the reason, but it's not the only path. Like in Estonia, for example, it worked very differently. It was mostly the entrepreneurial attitude of the Estonians and the fact that they, I think it was Skype mostly. Skype, yes. Back in 2000s.
It showed them you can actually create something which is going to go viral, become huge, and be bought by someone.
Not just show, they did support, every freaking Estonian company had Nicholas from Skype as an angel back in 2010s. All the Bolts, all the Ys, all the Verbs, they all had those guys. And then those guys made it big. And when I look at Estonian startups, they have 7 angels, each one of them. The Pipedrive guys, all the top successes, they support each other. It's a system that supports each other. And I think in Poland, it started to become like that as well. A lot of those guys became angels. A lot of funds were created by ex-entrepreneurs like Market One Capital, like Innovation Nest, and like us. So I think that's something that hasn't really happened in countries in some of the other countries in the south of Eastern Europe. I think that will still happen. I think we're just before that.
They just say they just need a bit more time, perhaps.
So my bet is we have to be there early. We have to start funding and because this is the best time to do it, just before it grows. I think,
of course.
That's our thinking. But yeah, I'm super happy Poland is such a success story in the global success story, actually, as in growth in this market.
That's very good. Obviously, as you say, it's something for us all to be, proud of that.
We should be. We're not proud enough.
We're not proud enough. I think so. If there's one thing that we definitely should, look up to, the Americans too. I think personally is that they are very proud of the country, its achievements, who they are. We should also be proud of the very entrepreneurial and business-minded people and firms and startups that we have in this country, and also even more so that proud of the fact that our government is apparently doing, from what you say,
doing a lot of bad things as well. Let's say that, but they nailed a few other stuff. So
yeah, so
credit when it's credit.
Yeah, they are apparently helping.
Yeah,
very good, very good. In terms of any sort of patterns that you see, I mean, in terms of the region, are there any sort of ideas or focuses or even industry sectors that you think certain countries, so like let's say Hungarians or Estonians or the Poles, that they kind of like, and I wouldn't want to say specialize, but kind of tend to focus on more than the others? Do you see what I mean? Like, do these like different parts of this have their favorite thing or a favorite theme from what you can say?
That's true. Like we know Americans really love consumer and a lot of consumer apps, social networks. All of them came from big markets like either US or China. In smaller markets like Central Eastern Europe, we tend to, it's just harder to start a community, a global community, a consumer community, not understanding the consumers that well. It's way easier to understand the business users because they are kind of more similar. Like every, say, construction company in the world, they have pretty much similar needs. So it's easier to start a startup to help those companies versus to just appeal to Americans in general. You need to understand the culture of it better.
No, of course, have the context, right?
So I think that's why B2B SaaS, those kind of companies where you can build something that's quickly being usable by enterprises or small companies across the globe, especially those that you don't need those connections to fly into all those countries and know the right people. But with SaaS, with the software as a service, you can basically start doing some marketing and you see what works, and it's
what people like and what they don't. Yeah, what kind of gets the reaction.
It's easier to. We're pretty good in that marketing part. We're not that great in sales to say Western markets. So I think that's why SaaS are pretty big. And the second type of businesses that we are really good at, not just Poland, but like Ukraine, Poland, Belarus, just the whole Eastern Bloc, Romania, is deep tech, is stuff that's hard. Because I think I have the theory that like in those our country we benefit, like the software engineering benefited because we just didn't have big research centers. We didn't really have like top global companies doing research in hardcore stuff that's like in the US. Software engineering never used to be the top job, top alumni of universities go after. They went after chemistry or physics or those kind of like hardcore engineering, like space engineering. And software engineering was kind of like, it's not for the brightest. But in Poland, in Belarus, in Ukraine, because all the top minds went there because this is the only way you can make money and you can actually start working from scratch because you don't need much. You don't need equipment.
Yeah, you don't need a computer.
You need a computer, that's it. So all the top guys are in software engineering, which is a huge competitive advantage to, most of the countries in the world, actually. So I think that's why a lot of hardcore stuff like artificial intelligence, like, OpenAI was co-founded by Paul. Not many people know that. It's one of the hottest companies globally, and it's a guy who just finished University of Warsaw and has a lot of friends here. And Snowflake, another huge company, also at Paul. ShipBob, at Paul, Wish, at Paul. A lot of different companies with like... So
artificial intelligence aspect to it.
Yeah, there is like that plus like everything that's just harder than building a simple app for a specific business. So we are pretty good at that. And when we look at like investment funds, we also tend to be looking at some of those aspects because in those aspects we feel we have an advantage compared to the rest of the world.
Very good. In terms of sort of any impact really that you might or might not see by sort of considering the sort of candidate startups or people ideas that come to you, do you see a sort of correlated phenomenon of let's call it a migration from Ukraine of businesses in the sphere of tech, perhaps startups that want to kind of take their roots out from there because of the situation, and transplant themselves here to Poland. Do you see a trend like this over the last few months?
Well, the trend hasn't really started in the last few months.
Okay.
It's been there already. So the Ukrainians used to be coming to Poland for funding for quite a while. It's the closest ally. It's the closest country that has a very similar culture with very similar people. So it's just easier culturally to get funded, to get the trust between each other. I think it accelerated a lot because of the war, and I think that impact will last for a long time. I'm kind of optimistic, in spite of all the bad stuff that's happening. I really hope that the people who moved in here will want to move back to Ukraine and build the new Ukraine. But now we have the network they've built in Poland, and Poland's got a network in the whole European Union. So I think they're just richer now. It's just like investments. The relationships are crucial because if you don't know the people, if you don't know who to ask, like most of the people,
you're not getting far.
It's just really hard to get funded if you're not known. If you don't have a reputation in a specific ecosystem. So those people have built the reputation now. Now I know who to call to ask, hey, this Dmitry guy, is he a hard worker? Like what kind of stuff he's developed before? And they were like, yeah, this is the guy. Like he always, like when he starts, he finishes. It's like, okay. And so now I can like do my due diligence in super early stage easier because I'm more deep into that ecosystem, not just Ukraine, but we some very similar migration in the Belarus when Lukashenko decided to kick off all the brightest people in tech, and they all came to either Vilnius or Warsaw. So we have big Belarusian hubs, a lot of really good, like PandaDoc, one of the biggest Belarusian company. It's mostly in Warsaw now. The whole team is here. We got some of those people to become mentors in our Reactor X program. It's just amazing how this, it's a bad situation in the East in general, but I think long term, it will be beneficial for all of those, both for those who stay in Poland, but also for those who move back to Kyiv to live, but they keep the connection. Now it's easier for them to raise funding, for example.
So essentially, we as as a country, the people that they worked with here, that they grew with here during these times, they will become the kind of core network in a way. And provide Poland will become, as a result of that, this sort of like access point for Ukrainian startups, companies in terms of the EU. And
I hope so. We did the same. The Poles did the same in the UK. Like a lot of people like myself, they moved to the UK, they spent some time there, but they wanted to go back to build something here in Poland. But now, with the connections, with the angel investors that I have in the UK, with the funding ecosystem, I think we can replicate that a bit, with Ukraine as well.
Yeah, I mean, same happened to me. Obviously, I lived there for 10 years, almost like a decade, and still you obviously keep in touch, with mates, with former colleagues, clients, etc.
Also, open your mind a bit.
It does
work
shift
with
your
people
perspective
from all over
a bit.
the globe.
Yes.
It's just easier to build startups when you can. Like if you want to move to do something in India, you already have a number of Indian friends. And
you kind of know how to speak to them and
it's just
what they are like,
And it's just, and also building teams that are a bit more diverse as in nationalities. So a lot of that just, happens.
That experience definitely helps. That, it's not that everyone is like, well, you can't say the same, but, come from the same cultural kind of, backgrounds, where you have like a multicultural team or people working, across different time zones, from different offices, say on the transaction or the project. Experience like that helps definitely to, be able to kind of, apply yourself and just, work.
Experience and trust. I think there's been a big trust shift between the Ukrainians and the Poles. There wasn't that much trust in the 90s. There was a lot of historical stuff that, were not resolved. There's still not all of them are resolved, but I think we just kind of learn to trust each other, understand we're very similar, and that will be a foundation to to build on for the future.
Yeah, I suppose last question from me. So when you work with your people on your platform on the early stage projects, on their startups, is there anything or any set of things that you kind of keep on seeing in terms of the way you assess these ideas, these startups, and you kind of see the same issue or problem that you have to always or most of the time address with these people, like a common denominator when it comes to stuff that you have to troubleshoot? Is there anything like that? It may be interesting for our viewers.
I'd say Central Eastern Europe has a problem with ambition in general.
Okay.
We're not ambitious enough. So if we already invest through SMOK, if I see a problem of ambition with a startup, with founder, I probably wouldn't invest. They need to fix that before we make a decision.
They have to sell the vision, the enthusiasm, the ambition that they have to you as well.
Yeah, they need to have it deeply. They cannot fake it. Like when I ask so best case scenario, where you are in the next 5 years, and they're like, oh, we're making $10 million per year, and we're a leader in Poland, Czech Republic, and Slovakia.
It's not good enough for you.
I'm like, well, is this what's your really ambition? Like, hey, yeah, it's just, it won't work as well. Our multiples just cannot justify investing. So those founders I still welcome, but I welcome them to Reactor X, the acceleration program. I think by working with top Central Eastern European entrepreneurs, because the program is kind of like a mentorship program. So you get a person who's either been an exited founder, or they really are, growing. They already raised fund. They know they can pass that knowledge to you, and they can pass some ambition to you. They can teach you that you are good enough. You can rule that industry. So I think they need to be working on that. I think that's the only thing. We have the skills. We already have the network. I think what a lot of people lack is the ambition. Once we got past that, I think the world is ours.
Very good, very good. I suppose that's all from me. So if you were to just summarize, like a key message to our viewers, 2 sentences, the very end, what would you say?
I mean, take over the world. It's just it's there for you. It's the best time ever to be, I know it's the crisis right now, like we in 2023, but the crisis is the best time to start building because those startups usually turn out to blossom in the times when the recession is over, and they get the fruits when the recession is over. So this is the right time to build. This is not the right time to hide. The best companies are built in those times. So just start building, and I'm here to fund you. So
essentially, buy winter equipment during the summer holidays.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, Borys Musielak.
Yeah, it was a pleasure.
Thank you for coming, and see you next week. I'm Dawid Malinowski. Take care. Goodbye.